Describe your background in Sioux City and Woodbury County. How long have you lived here, and just kind of describe, your roots in the community?
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in Sioux City. Lived here all of my life outside of 6 years. 5, I lived in New York where I went to college, and then I spent a year teaching British and American literature at a university in Vietnam. Went to West High School, was student body president. My parents are lifelong Sioux City educators. And I went off to see the bright lights of the big city, and also to go even further east where I was teaching overseas and met my wife. But we had a decision upon returning to the States, and that was where we were going to live. And we chose Sioux City because we love my hometown and we wanted to raise our family here, and we are so glad that we did.
Okay. And when did you become interested in politics and public policy? When did that show up for you?
At a young age, my dad and mom had me interested in service. My dad was a special education teacher. My mom taught Title I reading, and so they instilled a sense of service. But my dad also took me to debates growing up. I remember the 1988 presidential debate, and he was maybe on a different side of the political aisle than I'm on today. Mm-hmm. And so I was hearing people like Michael Dukakis and Paul Simon and others. And so at a young age, I was exposed and told to really give my voice when I saw something that could be improved upon, that it was incumbent not only to vote, but be engaged in the political process and try to affect change. So I did that in student government and in college as well. And then after some time, both teaching and owning a small business with my wife, we decided we wanted to see some change affected. And so ran for the legislature and served for 2 years in the Iowa House, and have been called upon by folks in the business and labor community and from different walks of life to get involved in this race, because I really believe people are ready for change, for positive change at the county level. And that's what I'm hoping to bring. And so I'm excited, and we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to change the direction of the board, and I hope to do just that.
When did you perceive that you were going to go a different direction politically than your dad or your parents?
It's probably after college.
Okay.
And making ends meet, and just had some different shaping influences on my life, and an older brother who gave me some different literature and philosophy to read, and so through some life experiences I came to some different conclusions, but I still love my old man.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Just what kind of literature? Like what stuff were you reading?
Well, anything from 1984 to some Bradbury and some different political philosophy, Hobbes and Rousseau, and seeing the differences in their political philosophies. Okay. And ultimately landing on sort of Burke and the idea of a limited but healthy and thriving self-government. And so those are some things that my brother and I bandied about while in college, and that helped to shape me.
Okay. And that's Edmund Burke?
Right.
Am I saying that right? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. How does being a state legislator, how would that translate to being a Woodbury County supervisor? What would be the skills that you could bring there?
Sure. I think it's a sense of leadership and vision, and deciding where we want to go as a county, and having some ideas of what it takes to communicate that to the public. I think right now we have a county board that does ad hoc crisis management. They manage from one crisis to the next without a long-term vision, whether that's in facilities or energy planning, or the amount of dollars that are going to be used for property tax relief in the future. And so I think because that's lacking, I think that setting a tone and a vision for where we can go through good economic development, true property tax relief, and an increased sense of transparency and good government. I think setting a tone and a vision for leadership is important. And the other thing I think, Brett, is that compromise and working across the aisle is something that I learned firsthand. I've said before, I've run against the board at large in some ways, But if elected, I think voters in Woodbury County will have expected me, as well as the other 4 elected supervisors, to work together to settle our differences and to do so with a good, honest dialogue. And where there's things that are a bridge too far that I can't meet, then I'll let people know, and I'll let people know why. But that legislative experience helped me in the sense of setting the tone and a vision for leadership, as well as working out differences in a healthy manner.
What would be the number one example? You talked about a lack of transparency and such, and long range planning you see as being limited there at Woodbury County. What would be the number one example that from what's happened in the past year or so?
I think the one that most comes to mind is the courthouse security plan. And I think it's one that a majority of Woodbury County and elected officials that are both Democrats and Republicans have really taken that board to task for. It's not just that one instance. I think that's just it's symptomatic of a larger problem, and that can be anything from meeting and having a quorum at restaurants, admittedly, and giving the appearance of impropriety and violating open meetings or open records laws, at least having that appearance, to having agenda items that aren't very clear, or moving a plan 15 to 20 minutes into a meeting that the public really hasn't heard and hasn't heard the details of. So I think that comes to mind first and foremost, but there's also conflicts of interest. And I think that's in the top 3 anyway of what I've heard at doorsteps, is that people are concerned about funding for nonprofits, supervisors who are voting on organizations from which they personally profit, and that's the case for my opponent. And so I think just restoring a good sense of good government that's open, honest, and transparent. It's what voters deserve, and I also believe that fits in with keeping meetings accessible, both in terms of location as well as time. I've heard other candidates in the other seat speak about moving the meeting times, and I fully believe that, like our school board and our city council, we need to be open and accessible to working families and folks that want to attend our meetings and can't at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning.
What are the things that, you went to the legislature with the skill set that you had as you went there for your term. What did you learn there specifically that you could translate to Woodbury County supervisor meetings?
I think it's a sense of, as I said before, with communication, of letting people understand not just the position, but what's going into that position, educating people, whether that's on specifics in the legislature of a bill's history, what the repercussions will be, and what modifications need to be changed to improve the lives of everyday working families. To me, that was some of the best feedback that I received was through newsletters and communicating back home and being accessible at forums. A lot of people will say, well, I didn't understand what that particular bill did, because as you know, there's only so many lines in a newspaper article or in the media, and so it's having a dialogue and a conversation and an explanation for people, and also listening. I was taught in the legislature by a senior senator, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you need to use them in that ratio. And so to be a listener and to take people's feedback, and I received a couple of letters from people who have ideas of how we can collect $11.05 million in uncollected fines instead of going directly back to taxpayers. Having an agency that would add a retainer to that fine and have the person who has the outstanding fine pay that, and working with a county attorney. But this individual says, I've approached the board, I haven't heard a response. Our labor unions, 2 of which have endorsed me, I sat down with them and talked to them. They haven't heard from their supervisors. The business community, same sort of message to me, which is why the Siouxland Chamber has endorsed me as well. So I think being a good listener is really critical.
So you have 2 labor union endorsements and the chamber as well.
Right.
Okay.
And that's not a natural marriage.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
not typical. And so I think that bodes well that our business community, as well as the sheriff's deputies union and the firefighters, the local 7 here, have listened and have weighed in on this race and believe that it's really time for positive change.
Okay. Tell me, then, you talked a little bit about this, but what would be, say, your top 2 or 3 issues that you want to do as a supervisor,
Sure.
or that most need addressed?
I think true economic development that's going to be long-term, sustainable, and grow Woodbury County in a healthy way, to expand our tax base and to make it so that people have opportunities like me who want to come back. We often hear marketed, it's a great place to return, or we want our kids to come back. Well, they need the opportunities to be able to do so. Secondly, true property tax relief. With CF's $1.7 billion expansion after abatement in the next 20 years, we may realize upwards of $40 million. And my goal would be that we invest in our county roads and in other infrastructure needs, but that we also give property tax relief to those working families who have been paying for so long. And then finally, the restoration of open, honest, transparent, good government that works for people and that takes into account and at heart every decision is for our working families, and to make sure that they are at the heart of every decision.
Okay. What impression do you have of your opponent? What would you like to, how would you assess him?
I have a good deal of respect for my opponent, George Boykin, and I made that clear at the debate. However, I believe that sometimes with longevity in public office, not always, but sometimes, people grow stale to change, to fresh ideas and a new perspective, and people become unresponsive. I think that is what has happened, unfortunately, here. I think that whether it's consistently going back to taxpayers, we just had a $1.6 million tax increase, and yet he's advertising that he's held the line on property taxes, something he admitted the other night in the debate he has not done. The courthouse security plan, I think that's another indication that the vast majority of Woodbury County residents don't want it, didn't like the way that it was rolled out, and yet there's this sort of non-responsiveness to those. So I would think unresponsive to the concerns and needs, and tone deaf to those, I think would most characterize what I see as wrong. Personally, though, I just reiterate respect for my opponent, but just differing visions for how we can grow and bring people together for a positive vision for the future.
Okay, then to wrap up, why are you, and again, some of this has been discussed before, but to boil it down, why are you the best candidate to win this position?
I believe I'm the best candidate because I'm going to be the most responsive. I'm going to be someone who listens and who puts at the heart of every decision that I make our families. I have a young family. I have four kids. I have a wonderful wife, and we work hard to make our family go. And I want to put at the heart of every decision I make, not only them, but also the families of Woodbury County. And we can do great things. We have great opportunities and potential, but we need to restore county government to the kind of county government that our working families deserve. And that's what I hope and intend to do.